Well, I'm happy to announce that we have added a very long-awaited feature to JCB. You'll need to upgrade to version 2.8 to actually get this feature. This feature, though, does affect how JCB builds the admin view, list view. So that means basically these areas where you've got lists of items. So if you've got custom scripting in your component in these areas, when you install or upgrade to version 2, you would experience that your custom scripting doesn't get added correctly. We'll still add it. It will still be added to the document, but you'll have to go and move it into the correct place and uncomment it and do the replacement of the code. Add those diamonds to notify JCB to update the placement. So that's just a heads up, because the list views are improved actually, the way it's being built. This extra sort of changes to the code snippets, changes the fingerprints and all that. Okay, so enough of that. What the new feature is all about is actually taking specific values like maybe this value and that value, and to combine them into one value, into one column, and yet have the option of still being able to filter with those values. Now we've got this component, sermon distributor, and I am planning to take the preacher's list view. You'll see that it now shows the name and a short description, or whatever description you've added. I want to have it also show if there is an email address. So if this email address is filled in, then it should show the email address. Or if it doesn't find an email address but it finds a web address, it should show the web address. So it should either one or the other, and it must connect it next to the name, and I think we'll use that as our demonstration of this feature. Okay, so now let's go back to Component Builder, and then we would go to the admin views. And if you haven't done it yet, there won't be an icon showing up anywhere here, but once you've done it, there will actually be one. I'll show you that. So we'll go to the preacher's admin view. So you just go to the one you want to change, and then under the settings area, no, sorry, not the settings area, there's the fields area. You'll see that there is now a new area called admin fields relations, and here at the bottom you see field relations. So that's the new area, that's the new feature. You could either click here or you could click here. Both of them will achieve the same, taking you to the same place. So I'm going to click on this one and say OK. And then you're basically in the admin fields relations builder. So you could click here on adding a admin fields. We're going to use the name, and we're going to join it up with the email and with the web URL. Now you'll see that there's this area column. The area column actually can target 3 places: before modeling the value, after modeling the value, and the view. So if you know what a model is, that means the area where you're still working just with the code. Whereas in the view, you must think of, you already have a HTML chunk that represents that field. So if I could show you that more directly in the code, and first looking here at the folder structure, you see I'm in admin, administrator, components, then sermon distributor, then here's the views and here's the models. So if we go to the model of the preacher, plural one because we're going to the list view, you'll see that it has items. Now at the moment there's basically nothing being modeled. Modeled usually would imply if it is a JSON object and it needs to be taken from JSON to an array, or if it's an encrypted value and it needs to be decrypted. Those kind of things, whether you want to work with the value before that happens or after that has happened. Okay, so then if you want to work with the actual item where it's still just an integer or a string and really that's all it is, then you would target the model. If you want to target the view, which in this case, if we go to preachers and then the body, you'll see that basically everything from here up to here is representing the ID. Everything from here up to here is representing the name. And so if you want to target this chunk, because it still gets generated, of course, then you would target the view. Because then JCB will still build this whole block for you, basically this block, and you can move this block around and join it with the other block for the other field as you like. So that could be that you then have two links, or that, yes, all kinds of interesting things can happen. My best advice is, try it out, take it for a spin, make some changes, compile it, install it, see what's changed, go to the areas, which being either the view or the model, and see the code that was generated based on your selection. Now we're going to make multiple changes and show you what will happen, so save you some of the time, you might understand what's happening. And so let's go do it. The first area I'm going to target is the model area. Then it has a joint type, which is either a concatenation with a glue option. The glue option is basically what do you want to be placed between the values. You could say, no, I want them to be completely cranked up against each other like that, and usually it'll still add a little space. It'll still add a little space in, and you could say, no, I want a little arrow between them like that. But it's basically a value you want to place between these two values. Okay, so I'm going to just leave it as a comma for now, and then save and close. And then also save and close the view. And now you'll see that there is a new icon here. We can click and directly go edit the relation. So that is the new icon added. Now if we go to the compiler, we will be able to compile this and see it in action. So I'm not going to do that, just going to compile Sim Distributor and install it. And now first thing is, let's open Sim Distributor and let's go to the preachers table and see how it looks in the interface. And so here we see it's basically adding both of them. It's adding the email as well as the URL, and because it's exceeding a specific length, it is escaping it, and we have this little pop-up come up here. But so there's the comma we added as a concatenation between the values, and so that is really what we expected. Let's go back and make some changes. Well, maybe let me first show you the code that was built. So we were targeting the model, so basically it just add this as a glue to glue these values together, concatenating them. Yes, so that was the model. Now, like I said, this specific view doesn't have really any modeling it does to the values. So even if I were to say select after, it won't necessarily change anything. Okay, so let's make another change. Let's, instead of using the default glue option, let's say, okay, we want to do a code option. Then you'll see that JCB cranks out sort of, okay, to give you the freedom to actually write code, we are using the IDs of the fields in braces. curly braces because, well, many reasons. I'm not going to waste your time. It's more or less boils down to the fact that it's difficult to know exactly what the field name is going to be at this point for every kind of type of field that is there. So working with the ID just saves us a lot of effort. But since it's difficult to know which field is which ID, we add this little comment to sort of give you a heads up. Okay, so this value is basically the website. This one here is basically the email. And I would suggest, if you are sure of what is what, to just take the comment out, because otherwise it will be added to the code. So that is just what I would suggest. So at this stage we know that what this is saying is basically what we saw in the code. It is almost exactly the same, except that it is using numbers here. So now we can do some little PHP. So we can say something like this. So we're basically checking if this is not empty, then we use that, which is the email. Otherwise, we fall back onto the, the URL. And if the URL is empty, it just means that there will be an empty string. So maybe that's not that ideal either. So let's make it a little bit more advanced. So now it's saying if there is an email, use the email. Otherwise, check, is there a URL? No. If there is, sure, then add it. If not, then add nothing. And it just stays without the comma and everything. So there we go. Got a little adaptation there. So just make sure that this convention is kept. So the curly braces with the ID and then the closing curly brace. This will then be updated with the actual name of the field. And so you can do full PHP coding in this area, and it will be implemented. That means you could also pass the value to a function which then passes it back to the value. And this is in the model, and this is before modeling and after modeling. Ooh, that's a good thing that happened. Every time you change anything here, it's going to update the code, because sometimes it is expected that these two values might look different. At this stage it doesn't, but it is a JavaScript that fires on the changing of any of these fields, and so I have to type all that over now. So the best idea is, if you want to make changes here, first copy the value in here, and then you can make changes and see what happens, and then as you decided what you want, you can just paste it back in. Okay, so there we have it. If it doesn't behave exactly right, just change it a few times. We'll still tweak the JavaScript here to make sure that it's working exactly 100%. So this is sort of beta phase, but it works. The thing functions as it should. It's just that I'm still ironing out some JavaScript here. Another thing, you can only target the name list field once. You cannot add it a second time like this and say, okay, here we're going to do it again, but now using maybe some other values to also target it in some way. You cannot do that. Only one of them will get implemented, the other one will be dropped. It's a limitation, I know, but believe me, this feature as it is now is already really stunning and able to achieve quite impressive results. Okay, so here we have it. We've adapted it. It will only show an email or a web address if there is actually one set, and if there is none set, it won't show any. That's the expected result. So let's save this and see it in action. So we'll compile it and install. So there we have it. The preacher is showing up with an email address, and that's it. Now let's create one without an email address. So we created one with no email address. If you see, there's none here. Let's add a web address. Well, just close again, show you and now there's nothing, not even a comma. But as you see, this now is a link. The whole thing is a link, and that might not be exactly what you actually want. But okay, let's add a web address and then save and close. And so here, because our web address was a little long, it created a pop-up. Now all that can be changed, but let me just do something else. Let's use a shorter address. Save and close. And now there you have it. That looks more acceptable. And so it detects now whether there's an email or a web address, and if there's none, it shows none. And so that was now with this new combine feature. So let's do something even more interesting. So again, we go and open that area with clicking this icon. This is sort of a shortcut. And now, instead of targeting the model, we're going to target the view. And this is where it really gets interesting, because now this little placeholder called field equals 199 is basically a chunk of code, as I explained initially in the beginning, where we are saying, okay, instead of targeting the actual value, database value, you are now targeting the produced code which JCB builds, the HTML block for that specific field. So we can now also, I would also encourage removing the comment. This is the comment that shows you that that is the name, that's the email, and that's the web address. So I would also encourage you to, once you've seen it, or just remove it. We might at a later stage take the comment and add it underneath the box so that it clearly is nowhere in the way. But it is for you to just sort of know that this chunk is for the email and this is for the website address. Okay, so again, I want to add a little bit dynamic script here. But I need to keep in mind that I'm actually in HTML. So if I want to add PHP here, I actually need to do the correct PHP tags and all of the rest of it. Okay. And that means you can actually target the item value. You can remove this and work with the actual item value, but this little placeholder will produce the whole block of code, which if it's going to be a dynamic link or something like that, it will produce all of that for you. So if it's a custom field which links to another view, then all of that can still be produced in this sort of dynamic placeholder here. But you can remove this, all of this, and you can have it echo out anything, so which you'll just have to code, of course. I think best to demonstrate is first use the concatenation option, and which will just put a break between the values, and then save and close, and compile, install. So we refresh this area, and now we see that this value is a link, but the other two is actually just text. And that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Going into the code, we open the body, and you'll see that JCB added the breaks. There's a break, there's a break, and there's the chunk of code that JCB built. So it really built all of this. It still built the link to the preacher, and then it still built this as well. So if this was going to be a link to another view, it will produce that code, checking again the permissions and everything, which is really what makes this area's implementation quite exciting, because it still takes care of the hard work of producing the actual code needed to display the value. If you pick up any behaviors in this new feature that's sort of unexpected, then please give us a heads up on GitHub, open an issue, and we will try and address it as quick as we can. Again, thank you for watching. This is the new feature of combining admin view values in a very easy way. It could have been done previously with some custom scripting, but this sort of helps you, and I'm sure makes it easy for you to just select the field you want to target. Of course, that means you first need to add the fields that you're already going to show in the list view, and then select the fields you want to join to it. And that's sort of, I expected you understood maybe that, but I realize I must mention that separate. So that means if we go into the preacher fields area, you'll see that we actually just got two fields, the name as shown in list and the description shown in list. So here we don't make any changes. We don't say that the email and the website must also show in the list view. In fact, only the fields that are not showing in the list view shall show in the relationship view as joint options. So that is just a heads up. What is exciting though is you can actually do a filter and you can do a filter or a search on these fields that are not going to be placed, but you know you're going to later select them as relationships. And then they'll end up creating, JCB will end up creating the filter and make it searchable. And even if it's a link to another page, you can click this to be a link, and then it will generate the link, which is, I think, amazing, knowing that it's going to set all the permissions in place and everything else. Okay, well, maybe I should demonstrate that just quickly. So here in the sermons area, we see that we have a preacher table and we got a name table. So that means we can actually we have these two links. This one will open the preacher as we, same as opening it from the preacher list view, and then this one's going to open the sermon. So this is going to be easy because now we can decide, okay, we got so many rows here, let's combine the preacher with the name row, and yet we want to retain this link as it is working now, and we want to retain the option to actually filter by the preacher. So let's show you how easy it is to do that. So we'll go to the sermons list view or admin view, and then also again to the fields and click on create admin fields relations in this. Oh wait, before we do that, I first need to remove the preacher from the list. So we're first going to go to where we selected the fields that needs to be linked to the list, the admin list view, and the one we want to remove is the preacher value. So it's this one, sermon preacher. We're going to say no, don't add it. Now when you do that, it's going to wipe out all the links that usually should not be selected if it's not a list view. But since we still want it to be a link and we still want it to be a filter, we're going to leave those checked and then click save and close. So now getting back to this page and going to fields, we'll see that the preacher now is no longer going to show in the list view, but it's still going to be a filter and a link. And if you compile now, it won't show up at all. You still need to now go and select the relations area, click on new, and then select name. Here you would now need to select the sermon preacher and then view, and then, well, we could either say we want to do this ourselves, or we could use glue, which in this case I'm just going to use a space, just an empty space like that, and save and close. And then we compile. Install. And then refresh the sermon page. We see that now there are two links here. The one is to open the actual sermon, and the other one is going to open the preacher. So if we click on it, it still behaves as before. The preacher gets opened. We close it again, and we're back here. And we still have the preacher filter here at the bottom of our page as we had it before. And so this is really great. We can also then open here, and all is working as expected. That's as easy as it was to combine these two values into one column while still retaining the actual links and everything surrounding this value, having it dynamically get the name, because obviously in the table it stored the ID only, and now showing it here, it means it's actually remapped it in the database. So let me show you that. So we open the sermons model, and we scroll down. We'll see here in the list query, it still maps the preacher table in and builds the connection on the ID and the preacher, and still selects the preacher name. Then going to the view of that sermons, we see, if we scroll down here, it has produced this chunk of code for the preacher's name, and this chunk of code for the sermon name. So it still does all the producing of the HTML code and all the permissional checking, whether does this user actually have the edit permission to change this value of the specific preacher. So yes, and yet it's showing the preacher name as the linking up in the database was done. So it's quite exciting. I really hope that you would find it as useful as I am already doing. And like I said, if you discover anything not to work as expected, please do contact me, and on GitHub, open an issue, and we will take it from there. Thanks for watching.